everybody, welcome back to Active Self-Protection Extra. It is Neil. I want to talk to you a little bit about your dry fire program today.
Today's video is brought to us by Mantis. The Mantis family of products is integral to ASP staff building handgun and carbine skills and are your most economical and fastest path to improvement in your skills too. Whether you choose the X10, the Laser Academy, the Blackbeard, or use them all in concert, they will help your practice be more effective, efficient, and fun. Go check them out, pick up a unit, and thank them for sponsoring today's video.
All right, if you've been following along, we have worked through a whole ton of stuff in the last few weeks through the Mantis X10 and all of the different programs and course of fires and a whole ton of stuff there. And one question has come up over and over and over about the Mantis X10 and how good is it if you don't know where your shots are hitting? Because really what the Mantis unit does, let me pull this thing out, I've got this thing on, but this little unit that mounts onto the bottom of your mag or the rail of your gun doesn't really tell you where you're hitting. And I've changed the setup in here a little bit so you can see my tiny little targets over here on the wall. Doesn't really tell you where you're hitting that. And so how is this a benefit to us? And so I want to talk about that a little bit here and show you some stuff. But basically the gist of it is that if we know how to read our sights and we know how to call our shots, which is a very difficult thing. If you think it's easy to call your shots, go take a class with Riley Bowman or Tim Herron or anybody else that teaches shot calling. You're going to find out it isn't easy. But if you can get the gist of it and understand that, you don't really need a laser or anything sticking out the end of your barrel to tell you where your hits are, because you can read your sights. And that's the ultimate goal of dry fire, is to learn how to read your sights. You get everything in dry fire except the recoil. So if we can read our sights, ultimately we get to call our shots and we know where they're going to hit on the target. So when we're in live fire, when we pull that trigger, we know where the sight was and we know where the shot's going to go, or a pretty darn good idea of it. If we have no control over the trigger and our grip is kind of shoddy and very inconsistent, it's very difficult to read our sights and it's very difficult to call our shots then. So ultimately it all comes back to, can we hold the gun still and press the trigger? And that's the first part of dry fire. There's so much more that we can do in dry fire. We can work on our draws to first shot. We can work on transitions. We can work on, Gabe White's 3 trigger stuff, the compressed surprise break, all of those other things. But ultimately, we've got to come back to, we've got to hold the gun on the target as we press the trigger. This is something that I got from Riley Bowman, who got it from somebody else, and I'm going to mess it up, so I'm not going to give credit because I don't know who he got it from off the top of my head here. But really, it's the idea of getting the gun on the target and holding the gun on the target as we go through the trigger press. And so that's the point of the Mantis, is that we get to gamify that to some degree. We've got some groups and we get to have some data. And we get to have some accountability and all that. Do you need one? I've said it a million times. You don't need a Mantis to do this. It just makes it more fun, a little bit more engaging, and we get to have a good time with it. Of course, they're a sponsor of the channel, and I love what they do. And I think ultimately I would not be where I am in my shooting progress had it not been for the Mantis and the tens of thousands of dry presses that I had over the years in the system as I was competing with John and with other people about who had the best benchmark or who had the best compressed surprise break or who had the fastest draw to first shot, or any of those kind of things. It makes it fun and enjoyable if you have that much of a, I don't know what the right term is. If you want to be competitive with somebody, that's what it's really about. And so it makes it enjoyable and fun. Otherwise, you're pressing out and, what I see a lot of people do is they sit on their living room couch watching TV and they just pull the trigger and rack the slide and pull the trigger and rack the slide. They're not aiming, they're not engaged mentally or anything along those lines. And while you may get to learn your trigger, and over time that will ultimately probably make you a little bit better shooter, it's not safe. It's not what we want to do. When we're not mentally present when you're handling a firearm, that's when the bad things happen. That's when the NDs happen. That's when, in our dry fire group, a lot of people have shared with me their horror story, for lack of a better term, and every one of them was a lack of mental presence, whether it be the phone rang, I had a conversation with so-and-so, somebody walked into the room, I was watching TV, or any combination of those kind of things among some other stuff. that's when we have that moment of lapse of mental clarity. We lose a little bit of judgment, guns get loaded, and then they go off in the house. And we call it an accident. I call it negligence. I think that, I'm not saying that accidents can't happen, because I know that they can. I know it's a mechanical thing, and bad things can happen there as well. But of every story I've heard, and I've kept track over the few years that I've run this dry fire group, there's what are we at? We're at 23 people have shared with me their horror story, and so I'm kind of honored that they would entrust me with their stuff. But we see patterns emerge, and every one of those came with some sort of something that grabbed our attention and pulled it a different way, and all of a sudden something went bang in the house, and you're staring at the hole in the wall, not realizing what happens. To a person, almost every one of them's like, I couldn't believe when the gun went off. It was crazy. So I go into this whole tirade about safety to talk about, with the Mantis and some of the other dry fire tools, we can do this safely, but we need to get mentally present. So let me kind of come all the way full circle back around to that, and why I think the Mantis is pretty important. Is that through the data that we get, when I pull the Mantis out of the desk drawer and I unload my gun and I show myself clear and I put my barrel block in and all that kind of stuff, that is me getting mentally prepared to go do some dry fire. And mentally, now I'm like, okay, so what I'm doing is potentially dangerous. I can do this in a very safe manner because I've got the tools to do that. But if I'm not mentally with it and present at the moment, that's when the bad stuff can happen. So just wanted to visit about that a little bit today. I don't care if you have a Mantis. I would love it if you do. Of course, they're a sponsor, they're good friends, they're great people. I think they've got a great product, great customer service, and I want to see great things for that company. However, you don't have to have one to do your dry fire. There's lots of different ways. You can work with some other companies. You can just pull up and learn how to read your sights. I think it'll take you longer. I think you'll get there quicker with this thing. But at the end of the day, as I have worked through all of these different, the different courses of fire and stuff, I've tried to give you some ways to do that. If you don't have your Mantis, or you don't have your Mantis yet, or if your battery's dead or whatever, you can still do all of this dry fire without it. But it just makes it more fun, and I think it makes it more engaging, and I think you'll get to a higher degree of shooting a little bit more quickly. And so, think about that. Spend some time thinking about, what is your dry fire routine? Do you go somewhere quiet? Do you do this in your living room? Are you using your pet as a target for dry fire? Let me tell you, the answer there should be no, because somebody explained to me how they shot their kid's dog using that as a target. When we have those mental lapses and we're using things like light switches throughout the house with real guns as we're walking around doing dry fire, those are just not great ideas. And I'm not here to judge anybody. I'm just here to tell you what current best practices are. And walking around with a real gun, with something that's mechanically working, versus like a SIRT pistol or something along those lines, or even our hands gun. You can walk through the house and use your different light switches and just use an empty hand and just gear up and focus your vision on that. That's a dry fire thing as well. But when you're gonna handle your gun and you're gonna do it in dry fire, I'm just begging you, please find a place, get your dojo. This is mine. This is where I go to dry fire. Those of you that have visited our house have seen this room, and some of you have even stayed in here before. So, but this is where we go do our dry fire. Sometimes I do it out in the shop or wherever. But I've got safe places to do, and if I'm not here, I really have to focus. I'm going to do a benchmark today just to see here. So I've got my tablet set up here. Let me turn on the screen record so you get to see. I haven't been doing dry fire, guys. I'm not gonna lie. We've been so busy with all of the travel and getting ready to roll out the app and all of the different things that we're doing. Neil has a life too, just like every one of you does. And if you guys if you're that machine that does your dry fire every day, every single day without fail, man, I applaud you, and I think that that's amazing. Although if you're that guy that has a life like I do that doesn't get to do it as much as you'd like to do, don't beat yourself up over it. Just pick your gun up and go to work and have some fun with it. I just took Riley's class. Pretty rusty. I feel like I performed pretty well. I had a great time. I went in with the attitude, I'm going to focus on the process. Shot pretty well. We could always do better, but that was without as much dry fire as I'd like. So, all right, so here we go. I'm going to do a benchmark. We're going to see what happens. I'm going to get mentally present. I'm going to engage my mind in what I'm doing. I'm really working on some vision stuff right now. You can see my tiny little targets here, and I don't know if you can see that on here, but there's a 10 ring on these little targets, and that's what I'm focusing on. That's what I'm looking at as I do that. And if I transition from here to here, I'm transitioning from that 10 ring to that tiny little 10 ring. That's less than a half a centimeter across, and so that's where I'm working, and that's what I'm doing. So I want to stay mentally present as I do that. So I'm going to set that right there. We are set to go. Got everything all set up and ready before I shot the video, so I think I should be on camera here. Here we go. 10 best shots. Come on, Neil. Focus on it all.
96.
It's a good start. So I noticed that my dot was moving back and forth a little bit here. That's typically, when I'm mentally present, it's focusing on this hand. Stabbed myself the other day because I'm a knucklehead. My hand hurts a little bit.
76.
Oh, got a 76 out of there just explaining to you what I'm doing. So I probably need to work on that, but here we go.
93.
There we go. Ooh. So there I've got the same thing. I'm over gripping with my strong hand.
97.
There we go.
95. 87.
Milked my grip there a little bit right at the end.
98.
So this little bit on my hand here that rests right here on that piece of metal, so it gives me, it's going to be fun. We're teaching a class this weekend. I should have a blast with this. Demos are going to be a good time.
94.
Okay. A little over halfway done there. Oh, got one left. So let's see if we can make this a good one.
95.
I'll take a 95 to finish. So with the 70 some odd something that I got as I was talking to you there for shot two, still averaged a 92. Took me about 102 seconds. So I was taking anywhere between, 8 and 10 seconds and 12 seconds in between those shots. But I was trying to help you come along with me to see what it's like when I'm being mentally present, talking to myself. It's okay to talk to yourself. I know some people don't like that, but I'm thinking through the different things. And I spoke with Riley at length last week at that class, and I'm working on some stuff with my left hand and with my right hand, trying to loosen this up, because the tighter this hand is, the harder it is to pull the trigger quickly. And so you've got to kind of work through that. That's what dry fire is for. And if you're not mentally present, if you're just sitting here pulling the trigger, racking the slide, pulling the trigger, racking the slide, you're not learning anything. Yeah, you're going to see incremental increases in your performance, but it's not going to be great. So that's today's dry fire lesson: is get mentally present, have some fun with it. If you've got the Mantis, join one of the groups, join some accountability there. If you don't, come join us in the Ask Dry Fire Challenge and have some accountability there. You don't have to have one to be part of the group and all of that. We'd love it if you do, like I said, but man, everybody's welcome. There's people that use different people's, different companies' products that are in the group. You're welcome to come there. All we want to do is help everybody get better and get better ourselves along the way. So hope this helped. You guys have a great week.